Now that we're back on. The collection is called 3 and 4 because I've actually combined the rest of the textbooks into one set. It's called The Age of Transition because everything is changing. I always wonder, should I actually teach this unit? And this ties into what you said just a few minutes ago. Because it is very controversial. Time period wise, it was North, which is Abraham Lincoln, versus South, which was slavery. But because of the conflict it developed in our country, that is what is so applicable to today. And that's why I teach it. I want you to be able to compare and contrast and analyze and do all those level 3 things we just talked about with what's going on today in 2020 with what Abraham Lincoln was saying in the 1860s. And that's why I do teach it. But it does include a lot of things where you look at and you go, well, I don't want to talk about that, or I don't want to do that. I need you to keep it in perspective and go, okay, she's not talking about it because she wants to just read about slavery. She's talking about it because she wants to go, what today am I going to be comparing it with? And that's yesterday where they started bringing in all those examples with Iran. That's why they were bringing in those examples, is because of the comparison. It does not matter to me what examples you choose. It does not matter to me what opinion you have. There is no right or wrong answer. The only thing that matters to me is that you can support whatever opinion. I don't want to change your opinions. I just want you to learn to back up an opinion with a logical argument, because that's the skill that the state says you need to be able to do, is to back up a logical argument. Okay. All right. So the war was 4 years, okay, and it did change our writing from the romanticism from last semester to the realism from this semester.
I mean, that's what I'm talking about.
Abraham Lincoln said in 1858, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." On your notes, take a highlighter and highlight it, circle it, put lots of stars, whatever you want to do. You have an essay over that quote. It's a question on your test. It's tied to your third 9 weeks project, and it's tied to your fourth 9 weeks project. So it is very, very important that you understand this quote. Okay. We're going to talk about this quote here in just a minute. You can make notes on what we talk about, and you can use those notes on every single assignment where that quote is used. Okay? So let's talk about the quote. "A house divided against itself cannot stand" is an analogy. Okay? Abraham Lincoln is not actually saying a physical house. Okay? So raising your hand, tell me what you think house actually means. Exactly what it means. It means that our country, okay, cannot continue to fight, or we will break apart. Okay? And so you need to think about it. When I give it to you on the test, I'm not going to reword the quote. So if you're not going to remember that this quote means that if our country keeps fighting itself, we're going to break apart, you might want to go ahead and make a note of that. But that's what he meant, because that's what our country was like. Is everybody was in so much conflict. It was brother against brother, father against son, state against state. Like literally there was so much conflict. Everybody disagreed, mainly about slavery. That was the main division, even though there were other things. That it was nothing but a time of turmoil. And so my question to you, the essay question that I'm going to ask, is to write a 5-paragraph essay saying whether or not you agree or disagree with this quote applying to what's going on in 2020. Okay? And so I'm going to push pause here in just a second, and we're going to talk about it. You can use any example you want. Okay? It doesn't have to be what you guys said a few minutes ago with Iran. That's just what everybody's been saying. It can be any example you want. The thing that is very, very important is you do not have to agree with your classmates. The only thing you have to understand is you have to respect that they have a different opinion, and you cannot belittle them or make them feel bad for having an opinion that is different from yours. Okay? If you do that, we're done. Okay? And you'll be writing out the discussion questions instead of discussing them. Okay? Because you cannot show disrespect or bully someone for being different. Okay? It's that simple. There's no arguing or what if. No, it's that simple. So my question today, and you can use any example that you want. Do you think today, in 2020, okay, our country has become so divided that we may or are going to break apart? I think that Abraham Lincoln was truly our greatest president, but I do think that in one aspect he did simplify this a little bit when he said that if we don't come together, our country's going to break apart. It's not that easy when you guys, the examples that you just gave me, politics, religion, at the time it was newspapers, but now it's social media, to be able to come together and agree, or at least agree to disagree, meaning, hey, it's okay that your opinion is different than mine, I'm going to keep my opinion, you keep your opinion, but we can coexist. It's not as easy as it sounds, is it? And Abraham Lincoln, when he said this, he was kind of making it sound like it's easy to do, and it really isn't. But this is what he predicted, and it is what your 5-paragraph essay is I'm going to give you this quote, and I'm going to say, to agree or disagree, that Abraham Lincoln was right today in 2020, that our country will break apart if we don't come together. And you will have to use examples from today in order to answer this question. Okay. Let me pause it 1 second. So after we split, and that's a good question, the reason that I'm bringing that up as an essay question is experts, and I did put that in quotation marks because I do not know what makes them experts, claim that our country today is in the same spot it was in the 1800s. Like literally, they pull up and they say just like in the 1850s, and they make comparison after comparison. But again, some of those things have proven false. And so I want your opinion. Do you think that really our country is in the same spot it was in this time period where we have the possibility of breaking into different states or even different countries? I think the quote from the article that I read, it says that the United States will become like Europe, each state a separate country. Okay, and that's where I got the essay question from, and that's kind of where I'm going with it. And that's what you need to think about as you're reading, because your comparisons are going to come from the things that we talk about. And I'll go ahead and read this since I talked about it when I wasn't recording. The big thing that was dividing the nation was slavery. Okay. It was illegal to import slaves, but if you already had them, slavery was not illegal. Northern states wanted to make slavery illegal and give slaves their freedom. The West, not part of the United States, we wanted it, we being Americans, wanted the land, and so there was fighting over that. The West did not want slavery, that was actually part of the reason they didn't want to join the United States, is because they didn't want slavery, and so it was all just one big mess. Okay, go ahead and fill in your blank. The conflict reaches the government, and this ties into, I'm not going to say name because I'm recording, what he said a few minutes ago, about the Democrats and the Republicans and who our president is and the conflict there. In 1856, that's what happened. Is up till then, a lot of it was just the populace arguing. And then the government got involved, and they were like, okay, well, this senator from Massachusetts said, we need to outlaw slavery, and we need to pass laws that gives them their freedom. Well, he was a transcendentalist, which that ties to last semester. Well, Carolina congressman, that's not a typo. At this time, Carolina was one state. Congressman Brooks said, that's ridiculous. He takes his cane, walks up in the middle of Congress, and beats him nearly to death. Because they, as congressmen, could not even get along, to the point that he was literally almost killed just by saying, no, we're not going to give them their freedom. After it was put in the newspapers that Brooks almost beat Sumner to death, The poet William Cullen Bryant said, "Has it come to this, that we must speak with bated breath in the presence of our Southern masters? Are we too slaves, slaves for life, target for their brutal blows, when we do not comport ourselves to please them?" This is a test question. Now I'm going to rephrase what it means, but on the test, I'm not going to rephrase the quote. So if you're not sure what the quote means, it might be a good idea now to kind of jot down in your notes what the quote means, okay? All right, so Bryant said, "Has the world come to this, that we have to hold our opinions to ourselves in the presence of those with different opinions? Are we too so afraid of others and their opinions that we keep our opinions to ourselves?" Okay. And so that is my question to you right now. Hold on, let me pause it. Do you think that today we are so afraid of offending others or of having an opinion different from other people that we don't say anything? Okay, cool. Right.
China roulette, see what city gets slaughtered this time.
No.
How many people are
All right, Civil War. Now, this video was not randomly chosen. And based on your laughing, I know that you think it was just Legos, but it actually was chosen for a reason. So, while you watch the Lego Civil War, I want you to be asking yourself, why did she...
Why'd you go?
Huh?
What happened to it? I didn't touch it.
I didn't touch it either. Ask yourself why I chose this video. Yeah, it's okay. And I noticed a couple of you chuckling, but let's look at why I showed this video. Abraham Lincoln was legally elected. A lot of the South did not agree, and they said, okay, we don't think of him as our president. Okay, he's not my president. So they seceded from the Union and became the Confederate States of America. Okay, succeeded. Seceded. Seceded. Okay. Here's what you have to think about as we seceded. We actually, Tennessee was not a Confederate, so border state. So the southern states seceded. Lincoln was really one of the smartest presidents because he won on the platform that he would not allow slavery to go to the West. Okay. Not anything with the North, not with the South. And so what he did is he won the votes for those who could vote in the West because they weren't technically states yet. He got the Northern votes, and he got the Northern sympathizers in the South, and that's how he won. And so to that intelligence, I think, and the fact that he actually cared about stopping slavery is why, in my mind, he's the best president. But that's my opinion, not experts. Okay, so war. Let me pause it before so you can write this down, and then I'll talk. Right. Okay, so because we seceded, the South seceded from the North, Civil War starts. This is your next test question. Okay, it's not actually up here, so you would have to write it on your notes somewhere. Do you think that America today understands the price we, as Americans, paid for our right to disagree? Okay, so hold on to your thoughts right there. I'm just telling you what the question's going to be. Okay, and that's, do you think as Americans in 2020 that we understand the price that was paid for our right to disagree? Okay, so what happened is we break, and a lot of boys and young men were excited. They actually rushed off to join the war. If you were from the North, you guys had superior guns, and so you thought that once the Southerners, they called them Johnny Rebs, once they saw them, that they would be so afraid that they would run away. The Southerners, who were factually, historically speaking, the better horsemen, and they could hit what they aimed at because they could hunt, thought that they were so good that they'd be able to, this is the quote from the internet, lick 10 Yankees and the North would lose quickly. That is not what happened. 4 years of very messy battles happened, and it was not long before the North and the South realized just how divisive the war was. I had some stats on here, and then Ms. Demers was looking things up yesterday, and it was some different numbers. And so last night, I went through and I was like, why are these numbers so different? And I wanted to get a better picture of the different things. And so this is what, when I was doing my research last night, that I had found for our numbers. By the time the war was over, 618,000 men were dead. That was 2% of America's population. If you take, I'm going to push pause 1 second. Yes. No, that 618,000 is those that died on the battlefield, which is 2% of the population. If that number was corresponding to today, that number would be 6 million people just dead on the actual battle. I don't say 618,000 because I look at these other numbers of people who were injured and that they later died from their injuries because of disease, or they weren't able to take it, and suicides, all of those. And then I looked at this number here, missing, those that they never I want to say returned home, but this is why I found out the different numbers. This is how we know numbers. And this website actually talks about, the historian on this website is actually talking about why our numbers aren't accurate. How they took attendance is you would sign up for the war, and then someone would keep that handwritten piece of paper, and then every few months or after a big battle, they would call roll. And here or not here, and if you said here, they checked you off, and if you didn't, they marked you absent. Well, either you were dead or you may not have been there that day, you may have gone home. They have no idea. And that's why the records are so inaccurate as to specific numbers. They actually, this historian was talking about on this website how he actually thinks the numbers are a lot higher than this, but because of the record keeping, especially when some of the people who kept records died in battle, that the numbers are actually a lot higher than this. For me, the numbers that I'm looking at, if you average in the wounded, missing, or those who committed suicide because they couldn't take what they had seen, you're looking at 1.5 million. Okay, that's the price that Americans paid, because when the Civil War was over, we became the United States of America. We were one country. Okay? Before, we were a member of a United States. We were all looked at ourselves as a Tennessean, a Virginian, Alabamian. It was all different. And it wasn't until after the Civil War that we became united. And so my question to you is going to be, do we today really understand the price that 1.5 million people died to give us the right to say, I disagree with you, and be okay with it? Because that's when it happened, is when this occurred, that gave us that right. Yes, the First Amendment says you can say whatever you want, but it wasn't until the Civil War that it actually was put into application. Okay, so you can put that in your notes and be thinking about it, but that is one of your test questions. Okay. Numbers wise, I can't put it up on the screen, so I will go ahead and tell you some of the other ones that I found last night that I found very interesting. Tennessee that's such a bad word, 4,000 men. Okay. And the reason I said only is because Virginia and North Carolina both lost 32,000 plus in 4 years. Okay. When you're looking at battles, the Battle of Gettysburg.
It was the bloodiest. I read some more.
Did you?
It was,
Stones River was a bad war, but we were looking at the bloodiest.
There's a difference in like significance of battles, but Gettysburg
was the.
All right, so because of the Battle of Gettysburg and all of the how bad it was, Robert E. Lee surrenders. The war is over. Okay, but that does not mean that our country's fixed. Yes, Abraham Lincoln says that we are now indivisible. We're one country. No one's going to ever break us apart again. But our country was in tatters. I mean, it was destroyed. Okay. And there you go. Americans at this time said, okay, we're going to come together. We're going to be unified. Every piece of literature that I choose is going to have something to do with one of these two themes: freedom or coming together as a country. And this applies to Fourth 9 Weeks as well. Okay. So if you're confused, how do I find the theme? Come back to this slide and kind of use it to guide you. Okay. Next test question is your third bullet down. It says the United States was a wiser nation. I'm going to ask you if you really think that we are wiser than we were in Abraham Lincoln's times. Now, before you say yes or no, and this has happened in every class, the comparison you have to make is to what we read. So if you say yes, that's fine. It doesn't matter to me. But what matters is that you can compare it to what we read. So you're only going to be able to use things that we study. So make sure you pay attention to that as we're going through. Okay. The ideal survived. which is, yes, you can speak your mind. You have the freedom of religion, speech, press, all of those things. And that as one nation, we're not going to be broken again. All right, the Civil War changed society, but it also changed the literature. One of the things that I'm going to get from you guys, you're going to like the plot. Like if I were just to tell you this is what the story is about, you'd love it. But you don't like reading it because it is honest. It seems unfeeling, unsentimental. It's ironic. It's very factual almost. Almost sad, somber. And that's because the writing is a reflection of that time period. Okay? And that's why I had to tell you what was going on, because otherwise you're not going to understand that these authors were literally traveling behind battles, and they were looking at this and then writing their stories. And so they couldn't write things like Devil and Tom Walker and Mask of the Red Death because there was nothing happy that they could see. It was all, look at this carnage, and how do I make the public, how do I write stories that really gets this across? Okay. All right, and then we will finish up on this video here. There's a couple things in the video that you'll need to write down, okay? If you've already packed up, I'm not showing it again because we still have a few minutes.
We have 1 minute.
We got 1 minute left. Your clock's all right.
We'll watch 1 minute of it then.
We've all heard the phrase get real at one time or another, usually when someone thinks we're being childish or living in a fantasy land. In American literature, the realist movement expresses a similar idea.
This is actually a
Popular from
test
around
question.
1865 to
What's realism?
1900, realism challenged readers to look past
This is what I would have you write down.
assumptions, social norms, and other
take a
expectations
picture.
in order to see the world as it really is. To depict the world in this way, realist writers turned away from grandiose subject matter and instead focused on the lower and middle classes, depicting daily life in gritty and sometimes
All right.
unpleasant detail.
See you guys on
The
Friday.
assumption behind
Remember, Friday's an even day.
Friday's even.
It's State of County of Jones when it talks about this guy who goes rogue against the Confederacy and takes back the state with his own records.
It's lunch. Bye guys. See you later.
Where are we going?
Lunch. We have fourth lunch.
We have fourth
Oh, so
lunch.
from fourth we
Welcome
just
to it.
go
And then
to-
after you go to sixth period.
Okay, I forgot about that.
See you later.
Bye.